rather short agenda today. No formal business items, but I think as chair, if I might, just recognizing the awkwardness of doing a Pledge of Allegiance as a group, I'm gonna ask Craig Malin to wave the flag, and we can give the salute and move on. So thank you, Craig, for that. Acknowledgements, announcements, and correspondence. I just told one story that I'd like to just acknowledge our troops on the USS Roosevelt and wish them the best as they solve that problem, as well as the rest of the folks in the country and in the world who are facing these incredible times. So I think we're all doing our part by staying home and zooming in. And well, Craig's in the office, I could see that, and probably Lane, but those of us who are working from home and zooming in, this is the right thing to do. And there's Doug Yount raising his hand. Is that a thumb up or a hand raise? Let me see if he's gonna. Doug. Okay, I'm seeing a thumb up. Okay, great. Thank you, Doug. Also, just acknowledging the work that Doug and the team are doing ongoing up there on C-Deck Hill. There's progress continuing to be made on that building removal project. I think it's impressive to see that continuing in the midst of all this. And I think the basis for that is it's focused on a housing related project. So even while some of us can shelter at home, many people are still on the front lines, if you will, though those guys are by design focused on hazmat control. So you would hope that they've got the right gear for that. So call that acknowledgements, announcements, and correspondence. So one other bit of correspondence that we can distribute this. We'll send this out to the admin after today's meeting. We got a summary from NHA advisors on kind of the history of the bond allocation when we were in December and what the thinking was, and then kind of two future scenarios, a little bit pessimistic, a little bit optimistic, really as a basis for folks to consider this discussion item. So it was sent to the board yesterday, and we'll send it around to the admin today, just for your information. And I think that's what I would call the acknowledgements, announcements, and correspondence. And then moving to item 4, public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to address the committee this morning? And you could do so by raising your hand or using it some other kind of means of getting our attention. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item 5, approval of meeting minutes. There's Melanie Beretti joining us. So March 6, 2020 special meeting minutes. Is there anyone who would like to note any changes, or is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Craig Malin, second from Dino Pick. So we'll have Harry do a roll call vote as is the protocol for these online meetings.
Craig Malin.
Aye.
Dino Pick.
Aye.
Lane Long.
Aye.
Hans Uslar. Melanie Beretti.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, great. So then moving on to the next item, which is the April 9th board meeting agenda review. And that is in the packet. There's one item of closed session, and then will be the consent agenda is shown here. There'll be a report from the Habitat Working Group ad hoc committee that'll describe the action recommendation from last week's meeting. And then there'll be the regular ESCA quarterly report and a status report on the sunset process, including an updated board meeting kind of topic outline and status of other transition specific items. So that all these reports will be coming out in the packet by the end of the week.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah, hi
Josh,
Melanie.
my apologies. I'm not finding where I can raise my hand, so I just needed to interrupt.
Okay, that's okay.
So before you buzz past, so can we talk about any of those?
Sure.
Okay. So I think I wanted to I know you said that since we don't have the reports for many of these, I just wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll go in order. The admin committee. Sorry, can you move down to the business items?
Yes. Yeah, so the first business item is the mid-year budget review. And
so for the mid-year budget review, I just am curious how that's being packaged. And is that just that's the entire budget, correct?
Right. The finance committee met yesterday, and so all of that information is here online from yesterday's meeting, including the mid-year budget draft. So this is kind of all there, and there were some recommendations from the committee that will affect how this looks, primarily having to do with this item here, the development fees. Currently, there's about 3 million that's been collected, and there were no additional fees collected, although some projected to be collected in March. So the recommendation here, and so there's the tune of about 700,000 that were projected to be from here till June 30th. So we'll be dropping this back to actual fees collected, and then that will, waterfall down to, let's see, where is that? It'll affect the CIP budget and the habitat budget. So those numbers will all be dropped down a bit.
Okay.
Okay, but if you look here, that these kind of end of line summaries are useful. These here.
Mm-hmm.
So Helen will be, leading this item and walking the board through all of this.
And are any of the requests that were presented from the various jurisdictions, I think they got presented at the last board meeting, are any of those requests incorporated in here, or how are those going to be presented?
Those are not incorporated in here. Those would be done after this budget is approved.
To approve this budget for necessary expenditures, and then with whatever's remaining, make a decision about any other expenditures.
Yeah. So there, it's these numbers here, which there's some sort of flexibility with the use of the funds. This is CalPERS termination and the HCP funds. So if this goes down by 700,000, so this number would, just think of this going to 1.6, and so there is some one item of outstanding or ongoing litigation, or rather a potential settlement, if you will. And so there needs to be some flexibility for dealing with that. And that would, all of this, these items would be considered at the May 14th board meeting, the requests.
Okay, so this is setting the mid-year budget, and then you have a pending litigation that possible
Yeah.
settlement that could affect these kind of pending balances, essentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the thinking. And
that
there's
is-
some,
And then those decisions would be made at the May, which
that
date?
would be the soonest. There's some calendar items on that item of potential litigation that may affect the board's ability to decide sooner or later. But our target would be May 14th for those decisions. It you know, it has to be done before the last board meeting.
Sure. What about, so questions, so that's what funds are remaining. I think I have a question in terms of before that goes to the board. I know we've posed the question of, or I guess I want to pose the question of possibility of encumbering, looking to encumber funds if there aren't remaining funds on the cash, on the balances for all
Right.
of that, to look at encumbering remaining funds for, I mean, I'll just speak frankly for the county's portion. Since
Right.
with everything moving forward, there's absolutely zero additional coming into the general fund.
Right. So that would that was something that was raised, I think, by Sherry from Marina, and I know that's a ongoing kind of point of legal research by Authority Counsel.
Do you know when that legal research will be available, or will it come to this committee before these go as recommendations forward?
Yeah, this committee will have a chance to make a recommendation on all of that in the early, at the May, I believe it's the May 6th meeting of the admin would probably be the point where this group can make a recommendation. And we would want to be sure that legal research is done well before that. So I'm seeing John Giffin's head nodding there, and he's got it. He's got it on his radar. So he's got a lot on the radar. So we'll just keep that on there.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll
Thanks
let if anyone else has comments or questions, and then I have on the next one.
Anyone else have comments or questions on the item 8A on the board agenda? Okay, seeing none. Habitat set aside distribution. So this would be the item where the board considers the recommendation from the Habitat Working Group.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty straightforward what the recommendation is. The thinking is that it would be framed within the context of all that was considered, and the recommendation that was put forward by the committee would be highlighted.
So if I may.
Yes, yes.
So on this one, I just, again, since the materials that are going to be presented to the board are not before us to be able to weigh in on, just the county is really wanting to make absolutely certain that both that the summary from the Habitat Working Group, as well as whatever report or presentation materials that go associated with this business item, bring forward the really having an emphasis on the issue that was raised by the multiple county staff and board.
Right.
In regards to the base-wide habitat management responsibilities that exist, that this distribution of funds deviates from that. It really shifts the money more towards mitigation of project development rather than directing the funds towards those entities existing.
Yeah, so absolutely. Our intention is to include the full scope of the options that were considered. So the ICF memo with the breakdown, and then the recommendation from Seaside. And I know Craig's working on his summary of the methodology that was used to get there. And we'll use that and incorporate that into our report. And then we will present all of that. And I think it's, the recommendation is, of course, coming from the Habitat Working Group members. And there was not a separate action by the administrative committee at that meeting.
Correct.
You know, I think it's just as a comment worth noting that kind of when I'm looking at, we're looking at all this internally, we're seeing kind of two, and this is probably just more for information for your board members to consider, or you to consider with your board members. You know, there is two kind of fund decisions that the board will be facing in this, either at this meeting or following that with the decision on the bond allocation, where, you know, there was a, you know, initially a need-based assessment and recommendation. One of the things that this item here, item 8D, will be a review of how we got to the bond distribution methodology. And as I was doing some of that research, I went back to this from last September, where there were all these options presented, and then it was eventually option 3 that was recommended based on the assessment of need. And then, you know, we're now in a situation where there's been another request to adjust that methodology to deal with kind of new information, or a, you know, another member's view on that. The same now here we're with the Habitat, where there was an initial kind of a need-based model that was done, and that was kind of captured in the various scenarios presented by the ICF team. And then there was, you know, the recommendation brought forward by Seaside. So I think it's just useful to have that in mind, because the members shouldn't lose sight of, you know, a decision on one side may, you know, affect sort of the political dynamics driving a budget decision on another item. So I just would encourage folks to kind of try to discuss that with your members if you get a chance. Ideally, we can come to some kind of, you know, universal horse trade solution, so that we're not tangled up in kind of people walking away with singed feelings and budgets and all of that, and having kind of challenging meetings. But I remain up, you know, a optimist, I guess, on that, to put that out there. So are there any other questions or comments on item 8B from this group or members of the public? Okay. Seeing none, the transition plan so this is the 2020 transition plan, and I'm seeing Kendall's raised her hand. So why don't I let Kendall talk about this item?
So just as a reminder, when we brought this previously to the board, we were looking at some sections that we were asking them to give us some guidance whether they should change or not. And they gave us that guidance. That was great. John, I believe, is going to let the board know next week that the resolution has been recorded at the county. So that happened. And then this is going to ping right off of the Habitat set-aside distribution, because whatever decision they make and that action item would be incorporated into the 2020 plan. And the other thing I just wanted to let everyone know, and Lane, especially you for Gail, unlike the last time where we did sections of this, we're going to take the entire 2018 adopted plan and give a red line so everyone can see what was proposed to be changed in the context of the entire document. So the goal is to get that out probably on tomorrow to make sure everybody has it with the caveat that we won't be able to confirm the distribution of the Habitat CFD funds until the board has given direction on that. And given this board, I think that we're all probably going to be on the same page that that's going to go for a second vote. So the idea is that this item, as well as Habitat set aside, will likely come back on the 17th for a second look-see, but just so everybody knows what you're looking at. It's the total package of the 2020 with everything updated to reflect the direction that the board has taken and just sort of overall change in general to make it line up more with the policies that we've been given.
Okay. Thank you, Kendall. Are there any questions or comments on what Kendall just described? There's Lane. Okay, figured we'd hear from Lane. Here, let me unmute Lane. You might have to unmute yourself, Lane. There you go.
So, Kendall, I just want to confirm you'll be getting out to us tomorrow. Red line.
We'll probably send it out with our packet is when it'll go out. Yeah, I think if we start sending out materials ahead of time that we run a version control matter. So we'll get it out with our packet as soon as possible. Just for the record, you know, we had the last Friday, the 2 meetings, and then we jumped into getting all this packet stuff together. So we've been, you know, just running as fast as we can, but the materials are kind of cooking as they're going along. So we'll get them out as soon as possible, no later than our distribution deadline on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of already covered this one. This was a request from Cynthia Garfield to review the bond distribution methodology, how we got there. And, you know, I know there's some concern over this one, and rightfully so. I believe with the dynamics in the market, I was, you know, would have been nice to hit it at the high point. I think that the question about what happens in the future, you know, no one has a crystal ball, but you know, with all this stuff happening globally, you know, just the ability to maximize this bond proceed, I think still sooner is better. I was reading an article in the Atlantic yesterday that was raising the point of municipal finance and bond market, and all of that's subject to change as the economy, you know, globally declines in response to all this pandemic. So I think hopefully we'll be able to get the most out of this bond. And then just as a item of hope, I did have a conversation yesterday with the representative from the Economic Development Administration, who is, you know, one of the federal agencies that's receiving the CARES Act stimulus dollars, and asked specifically about our ability to do anything related to this bond and that. And I do have some information, I think specific to the interest of Marina and the Second Avenue. There looks like there is some potential, so I'll follow up with Lane and Doug on that. But that, you know, I think now is a good time. And just there was a webinar that happened earlier in the week. CalEd organized a webinar, and there's a number of relevant speakers there, but I followed up with Melinda Madsen, and learned that I was one of the earlier respondents. So they have this thing called a notice of funding opportunity, a NOFO that comes out, and those are still forthcoming from the federal level. So as long as we're paying attention now, we would get into a early pipeline. You know, I think doing whatever we can to leverage, if we're getting this bond money and trying to find matching funds and other stuff, would be smart. I would also just acknowledge that I asked Harry Tregenza to sit in on that CalEd call. He's been doing a lot of support work with us in the economic development side. He's also now taking a higher role within our team. He's moving up to the deputy clerk role, and he's been really helpful on this, keeping us all organized on the Zoom. So Harry, thank you for stepping up and taking that all on. Okay, so that's a long-winded piece on item 8D. And the rest of the thing is there. Just to note, this in the draft agenda that went out, this date will be corrected. It's, oh, is this? Yeah, so the next meeting will be the Friday at 1 o'clock, not Thursday at 2 o'clock. Okay. So that is from this meeting, number item 6. And now we're, is there any other questions on item 6 before we move on? Questions or comments? Any from the members? Any from the public? Seeing, hearing none. Item 7, items from members. Any items from members? Seeing, hearing none. Moving to item 8. Motion to adjourn.
Nick moves.
Okay, we got some movements. We got some seconds. Let's call ourselves adjourned. So we'll carry on enduring the pandemic and doing our best for our communities. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to call you Josh.